Morning, everybody. Thank you for having us, guys. The one thing I'd say before I start is I've never presented in a venue I've also been thrown out of. And I came in here and I was quite relieved to make it through, so I'm up here in your face, ham yard. We're going to start, and Angie gave us such a kind introduction, so I'm going to jump in straight into the contents. Flora and I are going to do three things in the next 20 minutes. We're going to look at what digital audio is. We're going to look at why it's such a big part of people's lives, particularly on the mobile device. And then Flora is going to talk about advertisers and how they can and actually are take advantage of this world. So first up, and a nice clean introduction, what is digital audio? Now, the IAB define it as audio content streamed on a connected device. So to the layman, that is people streaming the radio, streaming music, or streaming podcasts. Point of clarity on the radio here, this is people actually streaming it on smartphones and laptops. This is not DAB or FM, which in this instance would be considered broadcast. And as you can see from all the logos here, I mean, there's a huge amount of choice on offer to both consumers and advertisers. This is a rich world where, and I think probably most people in the audience have 1, 2, maybe even 3 of these types of apps on their phone that they use on a daily basis. And that translates to some pretty big audience numbers. Over 20 million people a week are streaming audio on their devices, spending about an average of about 4 hours doing so. So let's look at some of the trends that are actually driving this growth. So we'll start with music. And I think it's fair to say that 2015 was probably the year that music streaming became mainstream. And if we consider the short history of the way we listen to music, that's not necessarily a surprise. If we think back to things like boomboxes or Discmans or even mini discs, for generations, music is something we've wanted to have with us wherever we go. Then all of a sudden, a company called Napster came along in the late 90s, and they made music free, and they made music digital, albeit illegally, but they changed the course of music for the following quarter of a century. Then Apple launched the iTunes, and they launched iPod, and I thought that Steve Jobs quite explained that incredibly well, where he said that all of a sudden people had 1,000 songs in their pocket wherever they went. But up until this time, advertisers couldn't get access. You know, the time that you spent listening to your favorite album or even your favorite single, advertisers could never get access to this time. And then music streaming changed that. So with the start with Spotify, shortly followed by SoundCloud and a host of other different services, the British public now use many different music streaming services every week to listen to well in excess of 500 million tracks. So this is no longer the spotty teenager, tech early adopter kid in its room. This is mainstream behavior for all different types of age and demographics. So we refer to this as a migration of what you call ownership to access. Think about it. You don't need to own that new Drake album that's at the top of the charts because you can access it through any one of these types of apps and sites here. And the implication for advertisers, if we look at the Midas data, is you can see that there's a significant amount of hours that moving out of times people would spend with things like CDs and downloads, and it's moving into the far-hand side of the page. And streaming time is connected, and the majority of it is ad-funded. So what I mean by that is you can serve ads into it. You can digitally serve ads in the same way you would video ads and display ads, and I'll revisit that later. But it's not just growth in music streaming. Dee and Siobhan already talked about the growth in digital. I mean, there's well over 10 million people streaming digital through connected devices, and the desire for people to access their favorite show or even station through a smartphone is bigger than ever. I think slightly differently to something like TV, where a lot of streaming is driven by catch-up, radio streaming is actually driven by that need to have that favorite show that you have in areas where you previously might not have. Think things like in the gym, when you're on the high street, when you're walking around a supermarket. Connected devices are making radio possible in these areas. And then on the final pillar of digital audio, podcasting, as this quote suggests, is having a very good time of it. Serial is probably the poster child for podcasting. The first series had over 80 million listeners alone. But I think probably the bigger trend is the likes of Sky and the FT and The Economist, content makers making more audio content than they ever have before. Does anyone know where this is? It's The Guardian. Someone had said to you 2 or 3 years ago that a newspaper would have a big audio department with a head of audio and an audio studio. You probably wouldn't necessarily have thought that was the case, but more different types of content owners are creating more audio. Also, if you consider that Amazon is recruiting comedians and audio specialists to expand its service, And even the mic dropping Barack Obama is doing podcasting in someone's garage, no less. All of this different types of audio content is actually contributing to the 12 hours of sound that's uploaded onto SoundCloud globally every minute. Now that puts it in YouTube's league. It's not as big as YouTube, but that just shows you the amount of time that people are spending with these things. Another quite powerful stat, I think, is that audio now makes nearly a fifth of all app time. So if you think about everything we do with our apps, from Candy Crush to WhatsApp to Uber to Facebook, audio is a fifth of this time that we spend. So for any advertiser who wants to target people on mobile, I would say that you should consider a mobile audio strategy. Some other wider tech trends are the fact that voice search isn't something that we all had fun with Siri, with our gimmicky like we did maybe back in 2011. This is now a major way that people search for goods and services, particularly when they're out and about, and is only set to get even bigger. And I think there's a massive link between language used in audio advertising and search terms that people use on their mobile. I think that's a big opportunity to be explored. And I think that this McKinsey quote kind of captures the underlying reason as to why, and I'll read aloud. It says, audio allows you to consume content while you go about living your life. You don't need to be tethered to a chair, eyes glued to a screen. You can listen while you jog, do the laundry, or perform a multitude of tasks that you can't do while reading and watching a video. In short, audio is probably emerging as the best way of consuming content while remaining mobile. And while people are out there consuming this content, a lot of the things, as Nielsen suggests here from an IAB US paper, is they're doing the type of stuff where you can't target them with other types of formats on a mobile device. Because a lot of the time it's in their pocket, or it's in their arm, or it's in their bag, or they're running down the street, or they're doing something where they're otherwise engaged. And I think that and these moments represent a huge opportunity for advertising. Audio story on mobile from a creative point of view further enhances the case. It's well acknowledged that a lot of formats, as they move on to the smaller screen, can tend to lose impact. But the amount of headphone listening done actually enhances audio strength. So all of the stuff that we know that's really good about audio advertising doesn't lose impact on a mobile device. It actually exaggerates the message and the delivery in that sense. 3D audio also allows us to do some quite cool stuff. So think about things like 3D audio. It doesn't quite work in a conference setting because we all need headphones, but the ability of being able to transport someone to a beach where you've got the sea in one ear and you've got palm trees over your head and you've got rosé clinking in the other ear, that's a really powerful brand experience for an advertiser. Or things like Starbucks asking people to shake their phone on their way to work and they'll automatically get a coupon right to their smartphone that they can use on that commute. Or even things like personalizing audio by people's gender, by people's age, or by any particular piece of data that you have on them. So hopefully the last 5 minutes has shown that all the time people are spending with these services, I mean, this is really rich territory for advertisers. There's a huge opportunity here. And that's why we invested in DAX at Global, quite simply, to bring all of that market, or as much of it as possible, into one platform. So advertisers can programmatically buy their audience at scale and target people across SoundCloud, across Bauer's brands, across Global's brands, at pretty significant scale. It's 15 million people and counting now. And to kind of start to draw my section to a close, really, I think platforms like DAX bring the strength of audio and digital together. So we all know about audio's ability to build brands, but we should also consider things like very high listen-through rates. 95% of audio ads served on connected devices are completely listened through to the end. That's a stat that other digital formats envy ads. Ad blocking is really minimal on audio, just due to the way that it's served in that sense. When you add that together with things like precision targeting, addressability, multi-platform digital buying that you have with digital and programmatic, you create a really, really powerful proposition to advertisers. So the kind of final chat from me really is, this is about seeing radio differently. I'd also urge advertisers to see digital differently and to consider audio as the new format for 2016. It can sit on a plan, it complements video and display because it targets people when they're not spending time necessarily with those formats. It's highly personal, it's got very high viewability, or should we say audibility rates, and it's a brilliant, brilliant way to reach people on mobile. So if this is a big opportunity, then how can advertisers make sense of this and deal with it? Flora.
I'm going to stop lurking in the corner now. It's a bit awkward. So from an agency perspective, Ollie's already talked about how the digital landscape is evolving, how radio landscape is changing. But actually, what does digital audio mean for clients is obviously quite complex. So bringing it back to basics, from an agency perspective, it's always been the same. Our role is exactly the same. Our planning approach is about the right person in the right place at the right time. But I guess that the main thing which is changing is that the marketplace is changing, and agencies really need to distill that complex marketplace and translate it a bit more simply so that everyone can really understand it. So we need to delve into those different new audience behaviours. And at Dentsu we've got a tool which is called CCS. I know a lot of people use TGI, but it's a panel of 1,000 people. And it means that we can tailor questions and look into particular behaviours which we're interested in. So Ollie's spoken about how digital audio is obviously massive in the market. I think as an agency, it's probably our responsibility to acknowledge that and also to look at it from a broader scale. So to understand that when you compare it to other really established media, such as newspapers, 4 hours average reading newspapers per week, and it's 4 hours of digital audio listening per week, that is really strong. We shouldn't be ignoring this as a media. It's something which we need to make sure that we're acknowledging. And the massive challenge for us as an agency and for clients, and I guess for media owners as well, is that the radio marketplace has become really fragmented, which is quite challenging. So previously, back in the 1920s, radio was just physical radio, but now it's evolved due to technology, and you can access it via TV, mobile, tablet, online, via your laptop, and also through the car and on your physical radio. So loads of different platforms. Not only that, but there are loads of different sales houses. So traditional radio has loads of sales houses, which you have to navigate, and I think we're all quite good at that as an agency. But there are also these new emerging sales houses, such as Spotify and the likes of DAX and Absolute InStream, and all these different opportunities, which it's quite difficult to know where to place your money and what is relevant for each audience. So that's a bit of a challenge. And I guess that the massive opportunity is that within digital, you get data and insight. And I think that taking a step back and looking at the broader marketplace, as in not just radio marketplace, the whole media landscape, there is a digital revolution going on at the moment. And I think that if we start to identify that and acknowledge why that is, which is because of data and insight, it means that if we can also get on board with that, we've got the benefits of radio and the benefits of digital, which is really important combined. So to give you an example of how at an agency we would plan different media together and how they really influence one another, we might target a broadcast forward campaign programmatically on our pinpoint audience, and then over in digital they would use their banners and retarget the same people. So this is where different medias start to communicate to one another, and I think that we really need to acknowledge that as a wider sense, because it's a massive advantage which we can use in radio. So that's why. What is our solution? So at Dentsu, we created a tool called the Audio Stack. I know that quite a few people have heard of it now, which is a market-leading audience-first approach. So what it does is it looks at traditional radio and it looks at digital audio streaming, and it works out the relationship between both of them and tells us quantitatively how to distribute the budget. So I'll explain this a little bit more. So our first kind of session of this tool is that we're using Spotify and DAX first-party data, which is calibrated with our CCS panel. And this creates a new reach curve, which effectively gives you a digital audio reach curve. We can then overlay that with the traditional radio reach curve, and it means that we can find out the optimal level of spend of traditional radio versus digital audio streaming. If you have any questions about the data side of things, please come find me afterwards and we'll have a chat, because I don't want to go too much into that now. These are some examples of the tool. I guess that the main thing I want to communicate here is that we're not about trying to decrease the traditional radio pot. It's not about digital audio streaming taking that and taking the money off elsewhere. This is about growing audio, it's about growing radio, and it's about making radio relevant. So once you bring in that digital offering, it really means that you will become more relevant to certain clients who were previously untapped. And I do have examples of this, so I will carry on and show you those. This was our first working example of the audio stack. So it's very tailored for each different proposal. So it means that you can input in your budget, you input in your audience, and every single solution will come out completely differently because obviously audiences are behaving with these medias in different ways. And what we're doing at the moment, we're starting off with net reach, so we're optimizing to get the highest reach possible. So you can see here that if you spent 100% in traditional radio, you get to about 65%. But if you spend 10 to 14%, you get an incremental 3% reach. So this is the concept of the stack, and hopefully that gives you a quick idea of what it looks like. At Dentsu, we know that this approach works because we've already got 2 established stacks. So TV Stack launched back in beginning of 2015 and Publishing Stack at the end of 2015. As you can see here, a vast majority of our clients are already aware of Stack. They know how it works. They've been sold into it in pitches, and it is highly regarded. The key thing here is that from TV Stack, it grew total TV and video. So video on demand obviously increased, 98% in fact, year on year, which is huge. But actually TV, the traditional medium, increased by 42%. So that shows that, by translating a complex marketplace into a more simple tool does mean that you can grow the marketplace. And Publishing Stack, I'll keep you updated when we've got year-on-year figures, but it's looking very strong. And this approach does benefit all involved. So it obviously benefits digital media owners, such as the likes of DAX and Spotify, but it also does benefit traditional radio sales houses. So we do want to grow radio, and that is our ambition at Dentsu. It also means for clients that we're giving them exactly the right distribution of budget and making sure that we're being cost efficient. And lastly, it obviously affects our agency and helps us because it's much easier to distill such a complex marketplace. So looking forward, radio and social have been inherently kind of connected for a long time. So we're looking at including maybe Facebook and Twitter and Instagram into this tool to see the effects of it. And then we're also looking at, if we were to look at partnerships, how that would affect the mix between each different budget. So those are on the horizon, TBC, and also any media owners who would like to give us their first-party data and work with us on this, we would be delighted. And then lastly, to kind of sum up, it's all about reaching the right person, the right place, the right time. So it's still that simple agency philosophy. It's just that we're trying to navigate a more complex marketplace and help you guys out. So that's it.